And that's okay because we said, look, there are ways in which you can affect policy, and groups will use publicity through mass media. They will use mass failings and they use litigation, the court system as well, and they can file those third party briefs, the amicus curiae briefs also. Another fun tactic that's been utilized in a variety of ways, protests. Okay? Protests. People love a good protest. All right? Now, protests, does a protest by itself usually change a policy? No. Okay? It doesn't. All right? People like government officials don't see a protest and are like, my God, we've got to change, man. All right? So why do it? Why do we protest? To make the topic or the issue known to the public. Because number one, people might be in town and seeing you protest, and they're like, my goodness, they've got a problem. Or who's always out covering these events? The media, the news media, and that magnifies your issue. All right. And here's the thing, you don't even need large numbers. If you just have like 50 to 100 people at some type of event, the media is probably going to be there to cover it, and they want to know, what are you upset about? Especially when there's like a slow news day. They're like, we need a story. Okay. So the media is going to be there to do it. And protests can change policies from time to time. All right. For example, Martin Luther King and 300,000 of his friends showing up in Washington, D.C. For a march for jobs, they're like, yeah, maybe we need to pass the Civil Rights Act. Of course, it didn't help that Martin Luther King, or it did help that Martin Luther King gives his I Have a Dream speech, which people were like, that was pretty good. It was pretty effective. All right. So protests can change things. But one of the things you want to let people know is simply that you're upset and you want attention. You want a light shined on your particular issue. Okay. And you've seen protests formed. Like I said, you had one, people have been protesting on several instances, Stewart's Hot Dogs in the area, because they feel like John Mant, the owner, who's in the West Virginia House of Delegates, is not really doing what he should be doing. Okay. Now, another one this summer. Did anybody get a chance to participate in the Black Lives Matter protest? I happened to be downtown, and I didn't even know it was happening the day it was happening. So I was downtown, and I took some video, and I'll show you later. I think I've got some of it still on my flash drive, videos and pictures from there. And I think that definitely had an impact, because in that one, in Huntington, West Virginia, I think the estimate was somewhere between 8 to 900 people are marching down from Ritter Park, down 8th Street, all the way to 3rd Avenue, over by Pullman Square. And you had people holding up signs and chanting different things. And I mean, it was pretty interesting. Quinlan, question, comment?
I think protests also have like a really long-term effect because they did the data analysis on that. How party they released party registration information.
Mm-hmm.
You see when like the 2 months after George Floyd's murder, you see like the May-June time period, Democratic registration soared in those 2 months like massively above the
All
Republican
right, and that's
registration.
because attention, like you're talking about after George Floyd's death this summer, because there is so much media attention on it, and there were several other instances like that happened, like with a flurry of activity, plus the fact that we had video evidence of that one. You do see people registering with political parties and becoming more active in some way, shape, or form. All right. Now, other than protests, sometimes groups will form a political party. They'll spin off and form a political party. Okay. And the best example I can give you of this, environmentalists felt like they weren't necessarily doing enough. And so environmental groups created their own political party. What's it called? The Green Party. The Green Party. Okay. The Green Party, they primarily created their party to deal with environmental issues, because when they formed this political party, neither Democrats nor Republicans were really addressing environmental issues. Now, the Green Party has spawned off to take on some other issues too. They believe in nonviolence, social justice, a whole host of other things.
They're eco-socialists now.
They've been called worse. Don't worry. All right. So ultimately, they're like, hey, you know what? We've got other issues we want to handle too. And there are some benefits to having a political party as well as interest groups. And we'll get to that next chapter when we talk about parties. Okay. Candidates and campaigns also another tactic that use campaign contributions. All right. Money. You give money to a campaign or a candidate. All right. Giving money to a campaign or candidate matters. First of all, why does a candidate need money from groups? Quinlan.
Those mail things you showed us yesterday, those things are expensive. TV ads are expensive. Having buildings, routine buildings to run campaign offices.
Campaigns are ridiculously expensive. If you run for U.S. House of Representatives, you can expect to spend $1.5 to $2 million. That's probably to lose. If you run for the Senate, you can expect to spend 4 to 5 million, maybe more, on average. Now, if you run for president, oh man, it's hundreds of millions. So campaigns are expensive. And even if you run a local campaign, like if you run for House of Delegates in West Virginia or State Senate, you're probably going to need $30,000 to run a solid campaign. Okay? And a lot of groups are more than happy to give you money, all right, because they know you need it. All right? Why do they want to give you money? Not you. Why is a group going to give you money? Smith?
They agree with what you believe in, and so they want to see you win.
They want to see you win because they agree with you on policies. We know if we get Bailey elected into office, she's going to vote yes on all the gun bills because the NRA supported her. All right, you like your guns, don't you? Pew, pew, pew. All right, now they give money to candidates or campaigns, and look, they realize this. They want to give money to people who are friendly to their issues. One thing you have to realize too, though, does a group care about your political party affiliation?
No, they care. Well,
What do they? No, you're right. What do they care about?
they care about what you believe in and what they're good or what you're going to do for them.
What you're going to do for them. If you, for example, if the NRA gives Bailey's campaign money, they don't care if she's a Democrat or Republican. They care, are you going to vote the way that we want you to vote? And if the answer is yes, then we'll be more than happy to give you money. All right, we'll support you. All right, they don't care about that. In fact, you're going to see, like later on, we talk about the breakdown of how they spend money. It is not at all uncommon for a group like, let's say, for instance, I'm the NRA, okay, and Bailey is running against Quinlan, and they both support gun rights, okay. It's not uncommon for us to give to both candidates because that way, no matter who wins the election, I have a friend in office. All right. Now, the thing is this, though, a lot of people think, well, aren't you kind of buying a vote that way? And the answer is no. All right. Because here's why. If you support, like, let's say that Bailey's the most pro gun person that's ever been elected to anything, okay? She's going to take money from the NRA, but even if they never offered her money, how would she vote on gun bills?
For the favor of the NRA.
Yeah, the same way the NRA would want her to. It's not like she's changing her vote or anything. I mean, she was already going to vote yes for pro-gun legislation. Or, for example, like we got anybody in here that's anti-abortion? You're like, hey, if the National Right to Life Committee comes to you and says, we'd like to give you $5,000 for your campaign, you're more than happy to take their money because you know that I'm already going to vote anti-abortion. Why not take their money? And you'd never take money from a group that you know you're not going to support. Because it's like, look, if over here, if Sid is an environmentalist, you seem like an environmental type person. And ultimately, you would never take from like an oil company because you're like, yeah, I'm probably not going to support their views. Okay. And if you did, and then you voted against their wishes, what's that group never going to do for you again? They're never going to give you money again. Okay. What you're buying is access to a candidate. So that way, when my education group gives money to Ben Taylor's campaign, we don't expect him to vote our way every single time. We understand that sometimes there might be some outlying issues. But what we do expect is to be able to call him and talk to him about issues and for him to reach out to us and discuss things with us. Okay? That's what you expect. All right? So you've got protests, you got forming a political party, you got campaign contributions, you also have endorsements. Groups will give endorsements. They say, we support this candidate in this particular race. In the 3rd district, Bailey Rivest, who is the best, versus Quinlan Solers, who's not from the hollers. Okay? We support Bailey. We endorse Bailey as our candidate. Now, what's the point in a group giving an endorsement? Absolutely. If you're a member of that group or you share that group's beliefs, like, here's the thing, going into the election, everybody knows who they're voting for president. All right. Because that's a big office. But not everybody knows who they're voting for state senator. And they see two names on the list and they're like, gee whiz, I don't know what to do. They will look to certain groups. Like, for example, y'all know Miss Amy. She's a big time member of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. And she makes sure that the people in her building get a list of all the AFT, all the teacher friendly candidates in this area. So that way, if you're not sure about one, you're like, oh, this one is the one that the teachers union supports. All right. For candidates, they love it because they're like, hey, that's a way for me to show everybody, look at all the groups that support me, and I can score some voters that way. Yes?
Whenever my parents go to it, they always have like a list of candidates and like their different beliefs. And it's not even like a bias list either. Like it's just a list of what they believe in.
You can make lists or you can take pre-made lists with you to the polls. And there's some of them like, for example, National Right to Life Committee. They come up with lists of the people that are anti-abortion in your area, and you'll see that they, other than making endorsements, they usually give out grades or ratings. Like, for example, the NRA, like, we give Bailey 100% rating, meaning she's pro-gun all the way. Okay, and so that's something that, and look, endorsements matter to people too, because like I said, a lot of people don't know how they're going to vote on particular issues. And I had 3 people the day of the election said, I know who I'm voting for president and for Congress. Tell me who I need to support in state and local races. And I'm like, let me help you out. Okay. And those are the people. And look, remember, state and local offices, they're going to make most of the laws that govern what you do. All right. So it's important to pay attention to them. All right. Members of groups will also testify in front of Congress. They get called to testify in front of Congress. Why on earth would Congress call up people from groups to testify? They have expertise in the field. Okay. I feel a little bit flattered when members of the state legislature, there's been 2 or 3 people who called me up and say, give me a teacher's perspective on this, on why this would be a good idea or a bad idea. Okay? Because they realize I'm in a classroom and I'm dealing with the problems every single day. So I know what some of the problems are in schools and maybe what we do. And I tell them, I'm like, hey, I don't understand why we have to have kids sign 3 different papers saying they won't bully. Right? I don't know why I have to watch 17,000 videos about bloodborne pathogens and like I have to go through video trainings that say I'm not allowed to hit a kid. Gee willikers, shocking. Quinlan. It does to an extent too. Now, another thing that's important too, somebody always says, well, Mr. Scalise, what if like an environmental group, somebody goes before Congress, and what if they tell lies to them? Okay, why would they not do that? Why would a member of a group not lie? What is it? And what happens if you get caught? You lose credibility. Okay, and one thing that people often care about other than their own reputation is the credibility of their issue. All right, if I go in front of the state legislature or United States Congress and lie about education stuff, that hurts all teachers, and I'm not going to do that. Okay, that makes life difficult for everybody. And then teachers, then God, every teacher in the universe will hate me. They're like, I remember that guy. Well, you still like him. What is it? Yes, she would. All right, she sent some union thugs after me. All right, testifying. Right here, you got a picture of this was BP's CEO who had to go answer questions in front of Congress after the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And believe me, he was feeling the hot seat that day because they were like, hey, do we need to make new laws about this? Tell me what happened. How did you guys screw up? What are you going to do to prevent this in the future? And they didn't just bring oil executives in, they brought environmental experts and scientists too, because they're like, we want to hear from multiple different people and multiple perspectives about why we should or shouldn't make new laws. And if we do, how do they need to be written? Because members of Congress can't be experts on everything. Okay? They are, but ultimately you want to bring people in to testify and provide you with some expertise because, look, one of the things that's frustrating, I realize that, and you should realize that your members, your elected officials can't be policy experts on everything. but you do want them to seek you out. Like, has anybody got parents in the healthcare field? One, two, three. Do they ever complain about things that they have to do for their job that they don't get a choice in? And some of that stuff is regulated or mandated by the government. Question, comment, Smith?
My mom said they have to wear masks until literally 2021 December.
I don't doubt it at all. Now, that might just be a hospital restriction, but the government, like, for example, requires, like, in terms of educators too, there are a lot of annoying things that we have to do. A lot of them happen at the state level, okay? And you're like, hey, you guys, at least you should do is talk to us. One of the things that we get most annoyed about as teachers is that, like, especially during the charter schools bill and teacher strikes, nobody sought out our opinions. And it's like, hey, you didn't respect us enough to come talk to us. I hear my friends who are doctors and nurses say the same thing, that there are a lot of things the government makes them do that they don't feel like is necessary for them to do. The Affordable Care Act, my eye doctor, I remember him ranting about he had to upgrade his building to include, he had to buy additional equipment. He said $50,000 is what he had to spend on his business. And he said, I didn't need this extra equipment. I have been working as an optometrist for 25 years. I know what I'm doing. And he's like, here you got the government telling me that I have to do this, this, and this with my business, and they're requiring me to upgrade this, and it makes me mad. So you're going to see that a lot. Another tactic they use, members of government, interest groups help write the bills. Okay? They help write the bills. All right? They give assistance in writing the bills, or they tell the members of Congress, here's how you should write it. Here's the language you need, the exact language. Now, a lot of people have a problem with that because they're like, hey, we didn't elect interest groups to make laws. We elected members of Congress to do that. And that's putting a lot of trust in groups, right? And sometimes that's good. You let more people involved in the process, but sometimes it's bad. You're going to find out that some people shouldn't be trusted with that kind of power. Sir?
And when the Republicans were trying to pass the 2017 tax bill, the print-offs that they had, the members of the Senate, when they were reading it to the Senate, I think it was the Senate that introduced the bill first, when they were reading it, in the margins, there was literally things written by lobbyists in the margins of the bill.
Oh, yeah, that is not uncommon at all. Like, for example, if we're considering a bill, you can get some people from groups to make recommendations and, like, put things in the margins. Tell me what I need, okay? What am I not considering, right? So it's another tactic you can use. Something else that we see frequently, lobbying, okay? Lobbying. There's two types of lobbying. First type is what we call grassroots lobbying, all right? First type is what we call grassroots lobbying. This is when a group calls members of the public and they try to get the public to take action. They try to get you riled up so that you'll contact members of government and demand a change. Grassroots lobbying. It's when a group calls citizens and tries to get them fired up about a particular issue. So imagine for a second the NRA sending a robocall out to West Virginians saying, President-elect Joe Biden wants to take your guns away. Call the Biden campaign and tell them you're not going to give up your gun. All right? That would be a good way to get people in West Virginia riled up. All right? And no, President-elect Joe Biden is not coming for your guns. Okay? Calm down, everybody. All right? Now, one example of what they did do, I remember this last Supreme Court nomination, Amy Coney Barrett. A lot of women's groups, like very liberal groups, especially pro-choice groups, called certain areas and said, women, your birth control will be under attack. Abortion will be under attack. Reproductive rights are under attack. Call your senator and let them know to vote no on confirming this justice. All right, and they had commercials pro and against Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation as a Supreme Court justice. That's an example of grassroots lobbying. You call the citizens and you get them riled up and you get them to take action. All right, now that works really well if you've got a lot of support, okay? Because you don't need a lot of money to do it. All you need is broad support, right? But if you don't have a lot of support, but you do have money, you take the other type of lobbying, what we call direct lobbying. And this one has all kinds of issues with it. Direct lobbying is when you hire a person to go persuade government for you. It's when you literally hire someone called a lobbyist to persuade members of government to do what you want. You hire a lobbyist. All right. If I'm a lobbyist and the NRA hires me and they say we need this legislation not to pass, they want to put restrictions on gun rights and we need it not to pass. I'm like, I'm on the case. Okay. And I'll make sure it never sees the light of day. That's my job. Maybe you need to get a bill passed. You hire a lobbyist to get that job done. All right. Now, lobbyists have a lot of ways in which they try to persuade members of a government. But what's the number one weapon that a lobbyist could have to persuade a member of government? Not money. So cynical. What's the best way? If I'm going to get you to change your perspective on something that you really believe in, what do I really need? Information. You need good information. That is the best weapon a lobbyist can have. You have to know your stuff and have solid information. Okay? Now, there's other tactics that a lobbyist would use, and I'll show you some of those here in a few minutes. But lobbyists, one of the things they want, their best weapon is simply to use that. Now, you can do a lot of other things as lobbyists. You're allowed to give them small gifts. You could take them out to lunch. So if I'm a lobbyist and I'm like, hey, Kate, you know what? I know you're a busy lady being a senator and all, but how about we have lunch at this new upscale restaurant in town and I'm buying? And you're like, well, I do need to eat lunch. So you're like, why not? And maybe you don't even plan on changing your mind about this vote, but at least you're going to sit down and listen to me. And at least maybe I can change your mind about a few things. All right. That's what lobbyists do. They use information to win things over. And maybe I look at Kate and I'm like, you know what? Obviously, I can't change your mind on this, but at least now you know that I'm an honest person and I'm not trying to BS you and that maybe we can work together in the future. Okay? And at least the next time I come to you on an issue, you're going to talk to me again. Right? Lobbyists have to inform themselves. And so you get a job to do, and it doesn't even matter if you believe in the cause. Like maybe Sid over here gets hired to lobby for, let's say, a coal company. Okay? You're like, I'm not really a fan of coal companies, but when they hand over that check, you sure are. You got a job to do, and your job is to get it done. Okay? Now, lobbying is a very powerful thing to do. How much money do you think that groups spend on lobbyists every year? Billions. A couple $1 billion a year gets spent on lobbyists. These people make plenty of money, by the way. If you're going to be a lobbyist, especially in Washington, D.C. at the national level, you're going to make 6 figures. The really good lobbyists, they're going to make 7 figures, right? Trust me, it's a good job to have, okay? Now, I want to show you one more thing, a little statistic here about lobbying, and then I've got like a little video for you. If you're really nerdy like me, there's a great website called opensecrets.org. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. OpenSecrets.org, if you click on menu here and go to influence and lobbying, let's take a look at lobbying. It's going to show you how much money is spent annually, and you can see that there's a trend, an uptick in the amount of money being spent on lobbying as well. And so you look at the blue bar and compare it to on the left here. This year they haven't finished tabulating, and last year $3.5 billion spent on lobbying. That's a lot of money. Okay. Number of lobbyists, one of the restrictions on lobbying, we'll talk more about this on Monday. You have to be, if you're going to register with the you have to register with the federal government to lobby in Washington, D.C. In West Virginia or most states, if you want to lobby in Charleston officially, you got to register with the people at the Capitol. So we'll look more specifically at this, but if you're a nerd, I would recommend looking at it.